Good morning to everyone who's joining us here today for a Smith Foundry update. My name is Stephen Mickelson. I'm a communications specialist with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I'll be serving as our host today, keeping our agenda moving. And this meeting is scheduled until 1:00 p.m. And out of respect for people's time and schedules, we are going to end at 1:00. Today is a basic rundown. We're going to consist of a presentation given by agency representatives, the MPCA, the EPA, and a couple of staff from City of Minneapolis Public Health. We will also hear from Paul Tuzzi from Smith Foundry, and then we're going to open the rest of the meeting up to questions and answers. I will let everyone know this meeting is being recorded, just for full disclosure. And when we get to the question and answer, you will have the opportunity to submit a written question. There is a box, it looks like call out or speaking boxes. It says Q&A. You can click on that and type in your question at any time. And when we get to the Q&A, you can also use the raise your hand feature if you would like to verbally ask your question. We'll go through this again as we start the Q&A, and my colleague Kevin Gaffney will also be monitoring that and assisting in going through those questions. And we will do the written and the verbal questions alternating, and we'll get to as many questions as we possibly can before 1 p.m. With that little order of what we're going to do, I will turn things over for opening remarks to the Commissioner of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, Katrina Kessler.
Good morning, everyone. As Steve noted, I'm Katrina Kessler. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you all virtually today. As many of you know, we held an in-person conversation on Monday night where we heard emotional and powerful messages from community members about how pollution has affected residents, loved ones, and your neighbors. And we honor the openness and honesty in those comments about health impacts brought on by pollution in the community, and we carry those words to further ground our understanding of the community's environmental concerns. The MPCA's mission is to protect human health and the environment, and that is at the center of our work in the East Phillips neighborhood, as well as in communities across the state. Grounded in that mission and taking your feedback, we have developed a list of actions that we are taking to ensure that you and your neighbors have healthy environments. I appreciate receiving messages personally from residents who have raised their voices with concerns about Smith Foundry and air quality in the East Phillips neighborhood. I acknowledge your frustration, and that is why we partnered with EPIC and EPNI on Monday for the community meeting, and that's why we are here today. We are working with local, state, and federal partners to address the inequities that exist in this and other environmental justice neighborhoods. And air quality in this neighborhood is a priority for the MPCA. Today, you will hear directly from other MPCA staff who are leading our work in the East Phillips neighborhood related to inspections, air quality monitoring, and permitting. We are committed to conducting our work in the East Phillips neighborhood informed by your lived experiences, and we are committed to robust engagement with you and the broader community. As you will hear from our air quality monitoring permitting staff, we want to identify ways to partner with you to commit to ongoing regular meetings and interactions about air quality data and how to analyze and mitigate air pollution in the neighborhood. For example, we'd like to partner with community members or trusted people within the community to add air monitors in the neighborhood and share and review and report air quality data. And as MPCA engineers and scientists evaluate the cumulative levels and effects of pollution in the neighborhood, we would like to have regular conversations with community members about what we are finding and seek input on how we can develop a permit to minimize health impacts. As we work to protect your health and wellness, and because we share your concerns about air quality in the neighborhood, we have also been working with Bituminous Roadways, the facility right next door to Smith Foundry. And we've reached an agreement for the company to stop operating. That will happen at the end of 2025. And until then, the company has agreed to operating requirements above and beyond their current permit requirements. This will help improve air quality in the neighborhood and protect residents. Also here this morning are colleagues from the US EPA, who we are working closely with on the Smith Foundry following their inspection to protect the community's health and wellness and to minimize pollution. We are also joined by representatives from the City of Minneapolis Health Department and company representatives. I want to say that the MPCA cannot carry out our mission to protect and improve human health and the environment and our commitment to environmental justice without centering the community's voices and perspectives. And we want you to all be involved in this work. We want to consider, value, and lift up your lived experiences as well as monitoring data and the state and federal laws as we do our work. We are committed to working with community connectors and leaders from the East Phillips Improvement Coalition and the East Phillips Neighborhood Institute to solicit ideas for community members interested in joining regular scheduled conversations as we move forward. So thank you again for joining us, and I look forward to hearing more about your concerns and sharing our work in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your remarks. We're now going to move right into the presentation from agency staff. And first up, I'm going to introduce Corey Boak. And presenters, as each of you pass off to the next section of the presentation, when you start speaking, if you could just briefly introduce yourself before you give your information. So with that, Corey, go ahead, please.
Thank you and good morning. Again, my name is Corey Boak. I'm a manager of the Land and Air Compliance section at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And I'm here today to provide an overview of compliance and enforcement's involvement related to Smith Foundry. And just before I get go through the review, I just want to make it clear, as we receive complaints moving forward, the most efficient way for you to notify the agency of your concern is by doing that through our website, our online complaint form, and registering as a guest. That is the most efficient and effective way to notify us of your concerns so that we can respond effectively. So with that being said, the last inspection that the MPCA had conducted prior to earlier this month was in 2018, and that was in response to a complaint. And we did find at the time that all control equipment at the facility was operating. A typical inspection as this one involves ensuring that maintenance and operation records are up to date and are complete. We're looking at just visible emissions and just going through the permit to ensure that permit limits are being met. Again, at the time, no violations were identified. If you can, Steve, Mick, you can go to the next slide. And then also between that inspection and then to date, the number of complaints. So as I alluded to, the complaint process, if you do have a concern by submitting that online, between 2018 and October of this year, we had received 13 complaints, 10 of which were related to odor. 2 of those were related to stormwater, and the MPCA, in response to the stormwater complaints, did issue a notice of violation in July of 2020 that addressed those concerns. And in October of this year, we did receive another complaint related to smoke at the facility. So as the slide identifies, we were on site on November 6th, an unannounced inspection. We did identify some operational issues that we are working closely with EPA to address, but we did find that the pollution control equipment was operating when we were on site at that time. So that is a brief overview of the MPCA's involvement with Smith Foundry as it relates to compliance and enforcement. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Kelly with the City of Minneapolis. She can identify the city's involvement in the process that they work with related to citizen complaints.
Thanks, Corey. Can folks hear and see me okay? Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Molman. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the manager of environmental programs for the Minneapolis Health Department. The team, part of my team oversees our environmental inspections, and part of that is that we respond to odor complaints. So when we receive an odor complaint from residents, we have a very specific protocol that our inspectors follow. So most of these requests come in through 311, and we report these through our city database called ELMS. We open a case, or we attach the resident complaint to an existing case. And then once the case is open, it does not get closed until the inspector decides that the matter has been resolved. So we, for Smith Foundry specifically, we don't have a case for every single complaint that's come in because many complaints were associated with one case. With each complaint, the inspectors conduct an odor monitoring, which includes using a funny looking device called a nasal ranger that helps detect what dilution the odor is at, because we are specifically following the city ordinance that states that we have to detect an odor at a dilution to threshold ratio of 7 dilutions of filtered to contaminated air. That's a little wonky, but basically it's getting to the idea that a nuisance is if an odor is detected by a reasonable nose. So you can't have someone who is too sensitive or not sensitive enough. And again, I'm happy to share our ordinance language that we are following for these inspections. If regardless of whether an inspector identifies a nuisance odor, if a violation occurs or not, the facility which has been alleged to have caused the odor does receive a notification. They receive what's called an advisory that lets them know that we have received an odor complaint. And then the person who made the complaint, if they provide their contact information, is also followed up with by our inspectors to let them know what action was taken. So I can share that from looking back to 2017 within our database, we received 51 individual service requests or complaints for odor associated specifically with Smith Foundry. And we did have one odor violation, and that was in November of 2017. Happy to share more when we get to the question and answers at that time. Thank you.
This is Corey again, and just looking through the chat, I should clarify that when the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency does receive an odor complaint, we do refer those to the city of Minneapolis. And that is because prior to the previous legislative session, we do not have odor regulations. We were given that authority this past session. We are currently in the process of rulemaking for odors, but that is why we've been referring to the city of Minneapolis. Thank you.
Okay, Brian from the US EPA is our next presenter for the next few slides.
Okay, thank you and good morning. I'm Brian Dickens. I'm a section supervisor with the United States Environmental Protection Agency in Chicago. I work in the Enforcement and Compliance Assurance Division, and more specifically in the Air Enforcement and Compliance Assurance Branch. And I wanted to talk today about our sort of the basic elements, the main pieces to our enforcement cases. Now, no enforcement case is unique, or all of them are unique. None of them follow an exact script, but there are basic elements, and that's what I'm hoping to talk about today. Then I'll spend a little bit of time talking about where we are with Smith Foundry. So hopefully you can see a flow of boxes here, and the first is an inspection, and we inspect for a number of reasons. It might be citizen complaints. It might be that we have data from the facility. It might be an ambient monitor showing something of concern. But we go on site and we inspect. We collect data, of course, talk to folks, interview people. After that, if we believe we need more information, which normally we do, we send an information request. We ask for more data. We might ask the company to explain why is this happening, or what's the history behind this particular issue. We ask questions, but we can also ask to quantify emissions. We can ask the company to stack test, is the common term that we use, and measure their emissions directly. And so that's pretty common with an information request. If after reviewing all of that information and the results of the testing, we find that there are violations, we believe there are, we allege those violations in a notice of violation. That goes to the company. It says, here's the background, here's the regulations, and here's what we believe the problems are, the violations of the Clean Air Act. In that violation notice, we also invite the company to talk with us. And normally they do. They come in, we talk, and we continue to work through the issues by trading information and data. If after that, all of that, we believe that there are violations that need to be corrected, we issue one of two, or there's sort of two together, which comprise an administrative settlement. The first of those is the administrative order. And it says, company, you're going to do these things in order to come back into compliance. It might be install a control device or have a new limit, but it's a specific set of actions that must be done. And then finally, there's the consent agreement in final order. And that says you're back into compliance, you've committed these violations, and you need to pay this penalty. The penalty is comprised of probably three pieces. One is called the gravity. That's a national standard for if you do this activity, you violate the Clean Air Act, you need to pay X, some amount. There's also the economic benefit component, which says if you sort of made money by violating, by not spending money on pollution controls or whatever, we recover that. You don't get to make money. You're not better off if you violate. And that's part of the economic benefit. And then last is called a supplemental environmental project, or a SEP. And that's something the company can do to benefit the community in lieu of sending financial payment to the US Treasury. So that's our normal process. And now the next slide will show where we are with Smith Foundry. The inspection was in May, and we found what seemed to be violations. So we acted quickly, and we did something we don't normally do, but we issued that notice of violation and the information request together. You can see those dates. They are the same. We wanted to make sure the notice of violation got out quickly to start that process of working to talking with the company, ensuring they're moving towards compliance. And we sent an information request at the same time. And it asked for a bunch of data, and it asks for stack testing. And that testing is coming up in a few days, in the middle of December, and that will give us even more information about the site. Yeah, so we have issued the notice of violation, and we are continuing our review. Go to the next slide, please. So US EPA, I can discuss the enforcement process in general, but we can't disclose details of an open investigation. Those are enforcement confidential. We don't want to compromise our investigation, so we can't discuss the details. We are still talking with the company. We're collecting information to move them towards compliance. As we get additional inspection reports or other factual information, we will send that. It will become publicly available. And I want to make sure I put in a plug for EPA's ECHO. It's a great site for showing what work MPCA has done and is doing, and US EPA also. So EPA's ECHO site is a great place to go. You would look up Smith Foundry or whatever, nationally, whatever source you're interested in, and you can see a history of emissions, enforcement, permits, things like that. I'll go to the next slide. This is my last slide, and I want to emphasize the partnership. And yeah, so EPA performed an inspection at Smith Foundry. We found violations, and we perform hundreds of inspections in all states across the nation. It's normal. We don't, us inspecting a facility is in no way an indication of a deficiency of the state program. We work cooperatively with the states to inspect, so it's totally normal that we were in the area and did that inspection at Smith Foundry. A successful environmental program involves a lot of components. It's enforcement, it's permitting, it's monitoring, modeling, toxicology. There are many, many elements, And it works best when different agencies or the state and the federal government, us, work together. That's the best way to achieve and make all of those components strong. And that's what we have with MPCA. I want to make a comment about MPCA's regulations. I oversee other states, and I know that relative to state regulations, MPCA Minnesota's state rules are strong. They ensure compliance. They ensure that action can be taken when there are problems. We have frequent, US EPA and MPCA have frequent and open communication, very positive relationship. And the bottom line is that we're partners in environmental protection. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Brian. We're going to have an air monitoring update. Carrie Palmer, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Carrie Palmer, and I manage the air assessment section at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. In my group, one of our responsibilities is running the air monitoring network in the state. And today I wanted to take a few minutes to share with you the air monitoring information we have around the East Phillips neighborhood. We've had a permanent air quality monitor in the Anderson School at 10th Avenue South since 2001. And we've also undertaken or collaborated on a number of special studies in the area over the years, including looking at particulates, metals, and polyaromatic hydrocarbons, as well as VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And most recently, we have collaborated with the City of Minneapolis's Community Air Monitoring Project. So the map that you see here shows our current monitors and sensors that are monitoring for fine particulate or PM2.5 in the Phillips neighborhood. Fine particles are extremely small particles, like far too small to be seen, that can cause serious health impacts, including cardiovascular and respiratory effects. They come from a wide variety of sources, and particularly from burning fuels. This can include cars and trucks, home heating, wood burning, and from facilities such as Smith Foundry. There are daily and annual ambient air standards that protect the air that we all breathe. So the triangle that you see here on the map, that shows that regulatory monitor in Anderson School. Currently, we monitor for fine particles and air toxics there, including lead and other metals. The blue circles that you see show the location of fine particle sensors called purple air. These sensors aren't as accurate or reliable as regulatory monitors, but they're much less expensive, and they can give us a good idea of the day-to-day air quality and help us to prioritize our monitoring resources. The majority of the sensors that we're showing on this map are from the City of Minneapolis's Community Air Monitoring Project. And Jenny Lansing from the City of Minneapolis is here today. She manages the Community Air Monitoring Project and is going to share some additional information on the project.
Thank you, Carrie. Like Carrie said, my name is Jenny Lansing. I use she, her pronouns. I work for the Minneapolis Health Department. I'm the Senior Environmental Project Manager. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. So as Carrie mentioned, the blue dots that you see in this map are affiliated with our Community Air Monitoring Project through the Minneapolis Health Department. And actually this map in the recent time that I gave Carrie this information, we have added even more purple air sensors in this area. We've added one at Little Earth and a couple more that are in this vicinity. So the purple air sensors are low-cost air sensors that measure fine particulates. The purple air sensors need an outdoor electrical source to plug into, and they need a Wi-Fi connection to transmit the data. We do have more of these sensors available. So if there's anybody on this call that is interested in hosting a sensor where they live, we can get one to you. And I believe that Carrie has added my email into a later slide. You can reach out to me and we can connect you with that resource. In addition to the purple air sensors, the Community Air Monitoring Project in Minneapolis, I should say we have 70 of these purple air sensors that are placed all across the city of Minneapolis, although we have prioritized their locations in both the north side and the south side green zones of Minneapolis. So in addition to the purple air sensors, we also have 30 AQ mesh sensors. Those are not shown on this map, but we do have a number of those sensors that are placed in the area around Smith Foundry. The AQ mesh sensors measure gas compounds. They measure total VOCs, carbon monoxide, and oxides of nitrogen. In the area around Smith Foundry, we have one placed at 28th and Cedar. We have one at 31st and Cedar. We have one east of Smith Foundry on Hiawatha between 28th and 29th. And we have two on Minnehaha Avenue, one at approximately 27th Street and one at 24th Street. In addition to the AQ mesh sensors, through funding from the EPA Enhanced Air Monitoring and Communities Grant, we will be doing some speciated volatile organic compound sampling starting in the first quarter of 2024. So twice a month for 21 months, we will be collecting air samples at locations across the city. We'll be taking those air samples to a laboratory where they will be analyzed for 62 different volatile organic compound concentrations. We can move those sampling locations each month, but we will definitely prioritize the area around the two green zones and want feedback from community on where you would like to see those air collection devices placed. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Just to note, looking at the data from those monitors, while they can vary from short or long term, we haven't seen anything over our short or long term health standards so far. There can be variation due to weather or other factors, but so far in looking at that data, we haven't seen it over the short or long term standards. The data from those regulatory and sensor monitors for the fine particulate are available in real time. And at the end of my presentation, I will have Jenny's information she mentioned, and also the links where you can get the data from those monitors. This next slide, and could I actually go back to the next slide, the slide before? I just had a couple other things I wanted to say quickly about that one. Thank you. I did want to note, while we currently haven't seen monitored data that indicates levels over standards, we still need to understand the odor and health concerns experienced by the community members. And we only have standards for a few pollutants. And as you can see, we don't monitor everywhere, although we're trying to get more of these sensors out as quickly as we can. So we also are planning on adding a couple more of our regulatory monitors so that we can better understand where we are with standards close to Smith Foundry and understand potential risks to the community. So we are working with communities right now to identify a location that we can add 2 more regulatory monitors in the coming weeks. These new monitors will monitor for fine particulates and lead, as well as other metals, to help verify that standards are being met near Smith. Okay, now I can go on to the next slide. Thank you. This slide shows some additional data that we've gathered, and I just wanted to share some investigatory work that was done in response to the odor complaints from the community. We did this work in October of 2022 and April of 2023. MPCA has established a drone program, and we recently obtained a sniffer that can measure a variety of air pollutants, including PM 2.5. That sniffer, which is another form of a sensor, it hasn't been compared to other better tested monitors yet. So we don't know for sure if the concentrations are accurate, but it can still give us an idea of what's happening around the facility. The permitting engineer on the Smith Foundry permit, Cassandra Meyer, suggested using this experimental sensor to see if it would help identify odor sources. Smith Foundry has indicated that they would consider additional voluntary controls if we identify sources of the odors that everyone is experiencing. In October 22, a drone with a sniffer attached was flown around the perimeter of the Smith Foundry and bituminous roadways. The results of that fine particulate monitor is shown here on this map. It didn't at that time indicate levels over standards. The flight was less than 2 hours, and you can see, we stay kind of in the green area here. Results from the drone flight were shared with interested community members, including former Representative Karen Clark in December of 2022. You can go to the next slide. We wanted to follow up on that drone flight in October during a time when bituminous roadways was not operating, and that facility does not operate in the winter. So in April 2023, we decided to do another walk around at that sniffer. We weren't able to fly the drone that day, so instead our staff walked around with the sensor to get some similar data. And again, that data was collected in less than 2 hours. This map again shows those fine particulate results. In this case, we saw very low concentrations in general, but we saw some higher concentrations to the north of Smith Foundry along 28th Street. While it's difficult to know exactly what caused this, whether it was the facility, road traffic, roadway dust, or potentially a combination of these. And I did want to note that the lowest relative levels were closest to where community members live. Overall, we weren't able to use that data for compliance determination since it was taken for a short period of time and it can't be compared to the daily standard that we currently have, which is an average over 24 hours. Can I go to my last slide, please? So just in summary, for the monitoring data in the area, you can find that real-time community air sensor purple air data at this link at map.purpleair.com. And also at the very bottom of the slide, I have Jenny Lansing's email. You can contact her if you are interested in getting an additional community monitor or for more information on the community monitor study that Minneapolis is leading. You can also get the results from our regulatory monitoring data at our air quality, through our air quality index, and see that daily air quality index data. And we'll also be looking at getting more of that data available on our website. I just wanted to mention, there's some stack testing that is scheduled for December. That stack testing will also help us better understand emissions from the facility and its impact on the air in the neighborhood. And finally, we will be adding those 2 new regulatory monitors as soon as possible. Again, they'll be monitoring for lead and fine particulate, and both of those monitors will collect data that we'll be able to compare to standards.
Thank you, Carrie. Cassandra, could you please?
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cassandra Meyer. I'm the engineer assigned to the Smith Foundry permit project, and I've also been working with Bituminous Roadways Minneapolis. So you may know me from conversations around these facilities these past few years, but if you're from South Minneapolis, we also may know each other from being in community together because I'm also from South Minneapolis. So I'm going to provide an update about Bituminous Roadways, as well as cover the draft permitting schedule for Smith Foundry and engagement opportunities there. But first, I wanted to offer that we're providing a lot of information and there will be future opportunities to ask questions. But feel free to reach out to me and my colleagues with any questions that you have, even outside of this call, and invite us back for discussion after you've had a chance to process this information. This is open for anyone to ask from us. It's a commitment that I've had throughout this process for community, and I will continue to hold that commitment going forward. So, update about Bituminous Roadways. Let's see. This facility is a nearby source to Smith Foundry, and they have been included in the analyses that are being worked on, where a lot of the work so far on this project has happened. And we now have a voluntary and enforceable agreement with Bituminous Roadways that their Minneapolis location in East Phillips will close at the end of 2025. This agreement will be posted online next week. This is a result of intersecting interests where Bituminous has for years said that they've wanted to move from this location. The community has wanted to see them move. And we are glad that we were able to help in setting up this voluntary and enforceable agreement. So we are excited to announce this. And again, that agreement will be posted online next week. Okay, so moving forward with Smith Foundry and the proposed schedule, the tentative schedule that we have for the permit project for that. Working with the facility, we have a date for submittal of an updated and complete application, and that is April 30th, 2024. The 2008 statute for cumulative levels and effects applies to this area. So this application will include additional analyses that are needed in order for the application to be considered complete. Those additional analyses include a risk assessment, a computer dispersion modeling, which shows predictions of pollutant concentrations in the area, and a cumulative levels and effects report that brings in local health data. This is where a lot of the technical work has been happening as part of meeting the cumulative levels and effects statute for a complete application. So based on having a date of April 30th, 2024, we are hoping to have a draft permit within the 2024 calendar year. And this is tentative, but with the inputs from Bituminous Roadways worked out, for Smith Foundry to take those and continue with their analyses, we are more confident that this timeline can be met. During the calendar year 2024, there are several opportunities for engagement. Because of the 2008 cumulative levels and effects statute applies, in addition to those analyses that I mentioned, there's also an engagement process that was developed in collaboration with community members at the time. And part of that includes that when we receive a complete updated application, we will have information sessions before we even begin drafting the permit. So you can see at the top here, those little bubbles with what look like people. We are proposing to have 3 information sessions where the materials for the application are available for review. Anyone can attend, ask questions about these additional analyses. And these sessions are also helpful for us because you all can help us identify anything that may have been missed in the analyses or just additional things that we should include. This has happened in the past on other projects where people identified things from the community. And actually at our meeting on Monday, someone provided me with information about new multi-level housing in the area and asked that we look at impacts at different elevations because there's elders that live at the higher levels, and we can and we will do that. So we're proposing to have 3 information sessions before we begin drafting the permit. We are also proposing that during the, my Zoom just disappeared. Okay, there it is. We're also proposing that during the public notice period, that we have 2 formal public meetings. And during that time, any written comment that we receive is part of the permitting record, and we have to formally respond to those comments. And then something that is, I believe, new to this area, at least, we are proposing to have, after the public comment period, after the public notice ends, 1 additional meeting where before a permit decision is announced, we will go through how we've addressed comments that we've received, and we will also go through the requirements of permit. And so again, that's 3 information meetings, 2 meetings during the public comment period, and a final meeting that we're proposing before a permit decision is announced. And then also, we will attend any meetings that we're invited to. So please reach out to us. This schedule is also open, and this engagement process is open for feedback. So if there's anything you want to see us do more or less of, or if you want to see us do something different, please let us know. And I believe that is our last formal slide, and I'll turn it back over to Stephen.
Thank you, Cassandra. Appreciate that. And all the presenters, thank you for the information. The remainder of the time, oh, I'm sorry. Before we go to question and answer, we are going to have a few minutes of comments from Paul Tuzzi at Smith Foundry. Paul, if you'd please join us.
Thank you very much, Stephen. My name is Paul Tuzzi. I'm the director of Smith Foundry. First of all, we would not have purchased Smith Foundry if we knew that there was this level of community concern. We purchased Smith Foundry last year from Neil Alstrom, who owned the facility for the last 35 years. There was no mention of this community concern prior to our purchase. Not all the fingers are pointed at us. We'd be more than happy to get our money back and live in peace. Since our ownership started last December, we've added maintenance staff and incurred costs to repair and upgrade machinery and equipment on items that should have been addressed long ago. I would like to share some unrefutable facts. We do not emit any lead pollution. We have tested our raw materials and the results are undetectable. We presently have an approved permit that was transferred to us in January 2023 from the MPCA. We operate the company legally within the confines of our present permit. We do not emit odor. Our neighbors are an asphalt processing facility, and unfortunately, petroleum odor is a byproduct of this process. We have also complained about this odor ourselves. And as of yesterday, we've received complaints of smell and odor from our property. However, our facility was not operating at this time. We want to be a good community member. At present, we support 50 families with good paying union jobs. Smith Foundry and its employees are open to meet with a select group of representatives from the community to be part of the process to improve and rebuild the relationship. I feel that the community is better off today under our ownership than it has been in the last 35 years. I want to thank you for listening.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to ask my colleague Kevin Gaffney, who is a public affairs specialist on the MPCA's communication team, to help us manage the rest of the time, which is going to be question and answer. We have about 45 minutes. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there is the opportunity to submit questions in writing. There's a button called Q&A. It looks like call out bubbles. You can submit a written question there. If you would like to verbally ask a question, there's a button called reactions where you can raise your hand, and we will be alternating between written and verbal questions. And our attempt is to get to as many questions as possible before we close the meeting at 1 p.m. I'll also note that I'll mention this at the end also, but MPCA is working to establish a dedicated email inbox for the Smith Foundry permitting process. And that email address will be posted and available on the webpage as early as we can next week. So people can find a way to submit questions, ask for more information, etc., through that email inbox. Kevin, how are we doing with starting up with the question and answer?
Thanks, Steve. We'll start with a few questions that came in through the question inbox. Jamie Gaithier asked, can you speak not only to the functional nature of monitoring equipment, but the calibration information that ensures the readings are accurate? Carrie, I'm wondering if you could address that.
Sure. For our regulatory monitors, for example, the one that's in Anderson School and the two that we will be putting up very soon near Smith Foundry, for those we have a very stringent process, both for methods that we follow EPA methods in gathering the data, and we also have an independent quality assurance group at the agency who double checks all our processes and data. We also work with the EPA, and they do audits of our facility here at the agency and of our entire process. So there is a very rigorous quality assurance for that regulatory data. For the sensor data, as we mentioned, that is not as rigorous, and that's why we can't necessarily stand behind that data strongly. It's more of an indication than ultimately something that we compare to our standards.
Thanks, Carrie. Representative Aisha Gomez also asked, what are the operational issues discovered during the recent inspection? Corey, I'm curious if you could answer.
Yes, so as EPA had alluded or had stated earlier, there is limited information because we are working with EPA on their investigation, and we have turned over the findings that we had identified. When I say operational, I want to be specific here without getting into too much into the detail. It was related to the control equipment. And it, as I said earlier, the control equipment was operating during our inspection, but when we're during our inspection process, we're not just looking at what is currently going on that time. We're also looking at records going back in time. So I hope that answers the question.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to open things up for a couple folks who have their hands up. First, Stu Bennett, please feel free to provide your question here.
Yeah, hi. So sorry, I have a few questions that I posted in the chat. The first of which is why are community questions not showing up in the chat? I'm aware of multiple people posting questions and they're seemingly only showing up for the ones that you guys are responding to or choosing to respond to.
Stu, they're all showing up in our inbox here, and once we answer them, I think they're made public. That's kind of the way that Zoom functions, just in the Q&A process.
Okay, so there's no way to make everyone's questions public, just because I think I guess it feels to me like it's very misleading. A lot of people are in here and not seeing that everyone's been asking questions, and we also have no way to know that you're actually answering all of our neighbors' questions.
I can try and figure out how to make some of the questions that come through public, Stu. And we will make sure to take note for those who have provided their contact information in their questions. And even those who do not, we can try and reach out to any questions that are provided in the Q&A to follow up if we don't get to them today.
Okay. I have a few questions, but the only one I'm going to ask here, because I want other people to have time, is in 2006, Smith got caught doing air violations and they were fined $13,000, almost $14,000. Does the MPCA believe that this actually was a deterrent to future violations, or was in any way came close to being enough to cover costs that neighbors and the state incurred for things like medical bills, time off from work, people having to keep their kids at home? And seeing as that was regulated under the same process described to us here today, why should this community have any faith that anything will be different in terms of the penalty actually reducing harm and health and improving health impacts in this neighborhood?
This is Corey Boak again. So I was not involved with that specific enforcement action, but when we are looking at a penalty on the MPCA side, when we calculate a penalty like this, to respond to the second half of your question, we are only allowed to take into account the potential for harm and the deviation from compliance as it relates to the specific violation. I don't know how we could calculate out, or if the actual impact to a community and how we would extrapolate that out, or medical bills, things of that such. But what we are looking for, again, on the gravity composition portion of that penalty. So when I say potential for harm, that is the actual effect. So if there's a stack test failure, there's high potential for harm there. And then the deviation from compliance portion, that is, say the stack test failure was a certain percentage amount over a limit. Obviously, the higher over a limit, it would be a higher potential for harm and a higher penalty.
Okay. Brian at EPA, do you have any additional comments to that, or no? Just want to offer you a chance if you have an answer.
I don't have anything additional. Corey touched on the main components, one of the main components, which is the gravity piece. There's a Clean Air Act stationary source penalty policy. It sets a national standard for how much of a penalty is assessed for a given failure, for a given violation. And as Corey said, it relates to a percent above the standard and several other factors. So we follow that policy. There's also the economic benefit portion I talked about. So yeah, we follow that policy that directs us to assess what the penalty should be.
I should also clarify that the MPCA does also include economic benefit, history, and willfulness also into above and beyond the gravity portion when calculating penalties.
Thank you both.
And Stu, I just wanted to clarify, I think we just updated the meeting settings so that folks should be able to see the questions in the chat box as well. Jonathan, would you like to go on mute and share your perspective or question?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Hi, yeah, my name is Jonathan Kent. I am a member of the Climate Justice Committee and was present at the what I believe was the last community meeting at the East Phillips Community Center, or sorry, Phillips Community Center. And so I was present at that along with many others. I know that I don't want to necessarily rehash and want to be mindful of everyone's time. So I guess my question is, with that in mind, and given there was overwhelming feedback from community members, specifically those in East Phillips, who live right next to, across from, adjacent to the Smith Foundry and Bituminous and Little Earth, in particular, a lot of folks showing up from that community. My question is, why is it that the MPCA specifically is moving forward, it seems, without any regard whatsoever to community expressed concerns? And specifically, I want to make sure this is very clear, the near unanimous feedback, literally by show of hands and by voice, and I realize that it's not everyone's perspective, but of the community members themselves, was no permit whatsoever, and please shut down Smith Foundry immediately, full stop. So my question is, why is that not being at all addressed in this meeting? And why is there, on the one hand, a claim to be open to community member feedback, and on the other, still moving forward at full steam with a petition, with a permitting process that by all accounts should not move forward? And in fact, the foundry, it's very clear by EPA alone, is already in violation. And so why is there, it seems like things are very out of order. And can someone explain, why is it that process of permitting is being prioritized over direct community concerns, EPA checks that are saying, please slow down, and there's problems, and the fact that people have already gotten sick and are dying and have died, and there is direct correlation? Could you please speak to that? And I actually would like specifically the commissioner to speak to this.
I can go. Thanks. Thanks for that. And I just want to reiterate that I and the agency take the lived experiences and what we heard on Monday and what people are sharing very seriously. And that is part of our ongoing discussions with EPA, part of our ongoing discussions around where we should put additional monitors, how we can have continuous monitoring at the facility. And I'll just say that as part of the laws that currently exist, facilities have the opportunity to continue operating as investigations continue. So that is the reality that we're dealing with. And we continue to think about how we can address community concerns with additional data as we work with the facility and with the EPA going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. And thank you, Jonathan, for the question as well too. CJ, do you want to provide your question or input?
Yeah, I was wondering, so I also do work with community organizing, and folks were talking about a follow-up meeting with the MPCA in January. and we're looking at the evening of January the 11th. And we were wondering if y'all would be available to come to continue an in-person dialogue with the community at a location that is like a little bit more accessible for like specifically the elders in Little Earth. I know that the East Phillips gym was not available on short notice this past time, which is why we're trying to get it in advance. And so I wanted to make sure that the PCA would be available to come on the evening of Thursday the 11th. Because the gym is currently open for that time. And we can reserve it and get it in that location that's more accessible for a different segment of the community. If y'all are able to join us, and I wanted to put that on your radar. I'm also going to start emailing commissioners and whatnot, but yeah, I wanted to put that date on your calendar and say that if the PCA is willing to, the community is very interested in having a follow-up meeting.
Thanks, CJ. Yeah, I definitely think we can commit to having representatives from the PCA available at that meeting.
Kevin,
Is there anyone else from the PCA that would like to add?
Yeah. Go ahead, Darren.
Kevin, can I just jump in on this? Thanks, CJ. And as we said earlier, we'd love to participate anytime, anywhere. CJ, if I could follow up with you afterwards, I just want to make sure we figure out schedules and making sure we have and such. I know that date's available. I just would love to work with you to figure out, is there another, like other times too that could possibly work in January to make sure that we can maximize the attendance for that, if you're open to it. I don't know if CJ's available to comment back or not. But...
Yes, we can look at other dates. The East Phillips gym is currently has a commitment on Mondays and Wednesdays, which we found out. We were originally looking at the 10th, but they've gotten back to us. They have like, I think it's like a youth community thing on Monday and Wednesday that is currently not movable and that we wouldn't want to interfere with anyway. So the Mondays and Wednesdays are out, but probably a Thursday or a Tuesday in the first half of January would be preferable.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I suggested the 14th, because it's not in that first segment of January that's fresh off the new year. But yeah, a Tuesday or a Thursday in January. And what's an email address that I can connect you with you on?
I can respond. I know you put like a question in the chat as well. I can respond to you, CJ, and give you my email address.
Okay, and you'll just do that in the Q&A section?
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right, awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Kevin, before we keep going, I just want to mention Kevin mentioned that we adjusted in the Zoom settings, so hopefully folks can see all the questions now. In addition, we will be downloading all of the questions that were asked today, and those will also be made available. We want to make sure people can see everything that was asked in addition to this being recorded. So all the questions that were submitted, responses, all of that is all public. We want to make it available to folks, and we will do that even after this meeting is over. Just want to make that comment. Thank you. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thanks, Steve. Heidi asked, please post contact information for where we can contact MPCA for questions and concerns. I can share Cassandra's contact information if you guys have questions or concerns about the permit that it currently exists right now. We are also working on setting up a Q&A inbox that will be available on our Smith Foundry webpage, where folks can provide questions directly and receive responses from the PCA. Within a quick turnaround as well too. So I just wanted to note for folks on the call that functionality is coming on our end. So a question from the chat, Sachi asked, what policy and regulatory changes would it take for the MPCA to be able to utilize the pollution data collected and reported by the EPA, given the close collaboration of those agencies? Why is the MPCA not able to immediately act on EPA data? And I think this would be a question for Frank to answer.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Frank Kolash. You see him pronouns. I'm Assistant Commissioner for Air and Climate Policy here at the Pollution Control Agency. Thank you for all of your input Monday night and today and at today's meeting, including the Q&A questions. To the direct question, we don't need any policy or changes. We are easily able to share information between EPA and MPCA on all the information we co-regulate, so that the Minnesota rules are also enforceable by EPA, and that's what we have been doing throughout this process. Much of the information that was included in EPA's notice of violation was actually collected by the PCA, and EPA used that, and that can go vice versa. So that process works particularly well. And I think EPA would agree that we're fully able to share data, use data as possible. And in this case, we continue to work directly with EPA around their notice of violation.
Thank you, Frank. This question is for Carrie. When you say that there were no levels over standards, do measured levels include cumulative monitoring of traffic and bituminous and Abbott? Question was from Heidi.
Sure. Hi, thanks for the question. So when we monitor in the air, that is all the sources that we see in that location. So when we're looking at the monitor on Anderson School, that would be from all the sources. We can't tell in our ambient monitors, in fact, what that source is. We just know it's either lead or a metal or fine particulate. So when we're doing ambient air monitoring, it is cumulative. It is everything. Then you just have to determine where it's coming from. And that would also be true for the sensor monitors that we showed.
Thank you, Carrie. Luke, I see you have your hand up. Please feel free to provide your question or input.
Hi, everybody. This is actually not Luke Gannon. This is Daniel Tolton-Schmidt, and I happen to be in the car with Luke, and I have a question. I wanted to build on Jonathan Kent's question a little bit, and something that struck me at the Monday meeting, where somebody asked, how close does a monitor need to be to the source for it to be effective? And I remember, Carrie, you saying that you didn't have that information at the time. I wonder, I guess, question one, do you have that information today? And question two would be, if you don't know how close a monitor needs to be for it to be effective, then what's the point of talking about monitors at all? And I think to just kind of sum that all up into a final question, at the Monday meeting as well, one of our community members, Delaney, asked why is, the input of the community not being respected as data, not being respected as evidence. And I think it's, interesting, as we've been waiting for 7 years for a permit for Smith Foundry since 2016, and really for about 25 years since 1997 when the original permit expired, or you could even say 15 years from 2008 when the Clark-Berglund law was passed. And you guys keep saying that, well, there's a permit coming, there's a permit coming. And I think, the community is concerned because there actually is a lot of evidence that shows that the pollution in the East Phillips neighborhood is unsurvivable for a lot of us residents. And so when you guys keep saying we need to do more monitoring, it is difficult for me to get on board with that, especially because it's already taken multiple decades. Plus, there is a mountain of evidence that already shows that East Phillips neighbors are, getting the short end of the stick. And so I guess my question is, what is the point of all of this monitoring if we already know that, the human body as an air pollution monitor, in a sense, we are already sick?
Thank you. I think Carrie can provide a little bit of additional insight into our monitoring process.
Yeah, thank you for the questions and the opportunity to kind of respond to the question that came up on Monday as well. So I'm going to start with a question just about how close does a monitor have to be? And basically, it does depend on the type of pollutant that you're looking at. For very fine particles, they can move pretty far. They're really small in the air. We actually look at them regionally, and the EPA requires that we put out monitors that can look at kind of wide areas because, you know, once these particles are in the air, they stay in the air for quite a long time. Now, if you're looking at heavier particles, and often when we're looking at metals or the bigger particles that you can see, those don't move as far. And sometimes we found that a lot of air toxics don't move as far. So when we're looking at these gaseous pollutants like nitrogen oxides, when we're looking at this fine PM 2.5, then yes, I think when you have these monitors that could be a mile away or so, they might be pretty representative. But yeah, when you're looking at compounds like bigger particles, when you're looking at these metal compounds, they can settle out pretty close, you know, within, you know, half a mile or so, or even less of where they're being emitted. So in that case, you definitely want to be closer. And that's one of the reasons we want to get this, particularly these metal monitors out, and also the fine particulates to make sure that we aren't missing something there. But we want to get this metal monitor out to make sure that we're close enough to the source and that we aren't missing something. You know, as far as the evidence from the people, I agree that this is real evidence. It isn't evidence at this time that I compare to a standard, but I don't know if there's someone else who might want to speak to this as well. Maybe Frank?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie, and thanks again for the question. And it does really get to one of the challenges that we have with our current environmental laws, but also the opportunities that we have both with the cumulative levels and effects analysis law that was passed in 2008 that will apply to any permit action that we take with Smith Foundry here moving forward, but also the basis for the cumulative impacts analysis law that was passed that we're working on the rules with right now about how to make sure our laws and our authorities better are able to incorporate and include that kind of information and data in our permitting decisions going forward. It's a challenge. We're continuing to work on that, but as I said, the primary focus is going to be coming in the rulemaking process for the cumulative impacts analysis rule or law that we do to make that new law that was passed in 2023 effective and be able to pull in this kind of information into our permitting decisions.
Thanks, Carrie and Frank. As a follow-up, there's a question in the Q&A box. Will lead detecting be included in the air monitors? Carrie, I don't know if you want to clarify that.
Sure. Yeah, I'm sorry that part wasn't clear. Yes, the metals monitor that we're going to do looks at individual metals. So we will know the concentration of lead as well as other metals, including things like arsenic and cobalt and chromium. So yes, we will have individual concentrations of those different metals. Also on the current monitor in Anderson School, we also have individual concentrations of those metals. And we do have on our website the results from the lead monitor, and we can make sure that we can try to get some more of that individual data from the Anderson School on the individual webpage that we have for Smith Foundry.
Thanks, Carrie. Another question in the chat. When you say you will compare the data from monitors to standards, sorry, this question is from Karen Clark. When you say you will compare the data from monitors to standards, what standards are you comparing them to? Does that include higher standards required by the cumulative impact law of 2008 yet? If not, why not and when? Frank, I think you might be able to answer this question.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Kevin, and thanks for the question. The standards that we're talking about comparing to, particularly with the monitoring data, are national standards or state standards that are based on the the research and potential impacts on human health, and we continue to engage with EPA in multiple forums on making sure that those are as protective as possible and updated on the regular schedule as required by the Clean Air Act. Those standards are not the same as in described in the cumulative levels and effects analysis process. That's a space, and I think Carrie may have talked about this previously as well, that the state of the science is not in a space where we actually have the standards as part of the cumulative levels and effects analysis process in the same way that we have the standards built into a national air quality standard or a state air quality standard. I do want to emphasize that national air quality standards and state air quality standards are focused on the health impacts of those air pollutants based on the science and the literature and the review research that's available particularly to EPA on setting those, or to other organizations like Department of Health or the California Environmental Protection Agency or other agencies that set benchmarks as well. But those are distinct, and they're a different type of standard than the review that we would conduct with a cumulative levels and effects analysis, where we will be pulling in a great deal of information about the health and other information and demographic information about the community where the facility is located, as we do the cumulative levels and effects analysis with the air modeling data, the risk assessment data moving forward.
Thank you, Frank.
Kevin?
One question. Yeah, Steve.
Sorry to interrupt. I was wondering, I think there was reference earlier to further information on the upcoming stack test and what's all involved in that. I think Corey had some information he wanted to share.
Sure, thanks, Steve. Yeah, just looking through the chat, and I want to make it clear that the MPCA, when stack tests are conducted across Minnesota, that the MPCA, we are not physically doing any of those stack tests ourselves. We do not have the resources nor the expertise to be doing that. Rather, third-party companies who are hired by companies are conducting those stack tests. We do have the opportunity to witness those stack tests. We are notified before the stack test is conducted. So a plan is submitted, we review, we agree with the stack testing company and the facility, what is going to be done, what the test is going to be done for, things of that nature. And then once the results are finished, then they're sent to us for review and review at that point. So just wanted to clarify that this is not uncommon. The stack testing coming up at Smith, that a third party is doing that. Our inspections, those are unannounced. And that's kind of the difference. So just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and Kevin, I want to also emphasize that for the stack test happening at Smith Foundry in December, the PCA will be on site to ensure that the facility is operating as it is supposed to be operating, to make the tests valid and be observing all of the tests. And then there was a question in there about would we allow member of the community to attend that, and we would be open to that and interested in talking to anyone who would be available and work out the details to make that available as well.
Can we provide any clarification, because I know this is coming up in the chat here too, on what pollutants will be included in the stack test, and whether or not the furnace is part of the test too?
Hi, this is Brian Dickens from US EPA, and so we issued the information requests that asked for the testing. And at this time, I understand the pollutants will be particulate matter, opacity, and lead. And there are 5 emission units that we're measuring the pollutants from, and it covers the full suite of the emission units at the site.
Thank you, Brian. Stacy, would you like to provide your question or input?
Hi, are you calling on me? I'm sorry,
Yep.
thank you. I
Yes.
appreciate the
Yes.
time. I appreciate the forum. To Paul Tutsi, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I just want to say before I ask my question that your doublespeak is noted. You deny odors from Smith Foundry are from pollutants, but then you basically say they're expected byproducts of the work being done at Smith Foundry. This is precisely why Smith Foundry should not be operating in a residential neighborhood. In fact, the Minneapolis City Council unanimously this past May passed an ordinance that will now enforce a citywide prohibition on new scrap metal industries, chemical manufacturers, commercial laundries, etc. It is the height of hypocrisy that the Hennepin Energy Recovery Center, known as HERC, and Smith Foundry were grandfathered in, as both are in marginalized communities as defined by the city's green zones. It is the age-old profits before people that allows Smith Foundry to continue to operate, pollute, injure, and kill, just so it can make profits for people like you who don't even live in the community. If you feel it is so safe, then come on down and live in that community, relocate here. I don't think that's going to happen. My specific question is to MPCA and EPA. Will you confirm that you will order a full furnace stack test, all metals and HAPs by a third party? Thank you.
Stacy, thank you for your question. From my understanding, the testing that is being done in December is being done by the third party, and all of our stacks will be tested at that time. And another, just to correct you, the byproduct that I was speaking about was of the asphalt facility due to the odor. Thank you very much.
And I'm curious if EPA could provide any additional clarity just on the stack testing process as well. And Brian, I know you just shared a little bit, but is there anything else that you can clarify there as part of the stack testing? Specifically, any details about where in the stacks the testing will be completed, things like that.
The testing is, first of all, as Corey explained, there are protocols. It takes weeks to set up the tests. They're done by third parties, and they're prescribed to be under conditions that will show the full extent of the pollution. So we don't want to measure a day in which production is low or with raw materials that are not representative. So we're making sure that the results that we get represent maximum normal conditions. So test at max is the phrase that we use. So the operations will be running, and they'll be running at high levels, and so we can see sort of the maximum level of pollution that's coming out. The stack is normally tested at its outlet, so near where the pollution will be entering the atmosphere, because that's most representative of the emissions.
It's Paul Tusi again. I would just like to add, I just want to clear any confusion that Smith Foundry does not own bituminous roadways. There are two independent operating companies.
Going to a question from the chat here. Is there a way to measure the particulate matter dust settling inside people's homes? As mentioned at the Monday meeting, I'm curious if someone from Minneapolis Public Health might be able to answer that question.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yes. Jenny, is there a way to measure the particulate matter or dust settling inside people's homes that was mentioned at the Monday meeting?
So through our Lead and Healthy Homes program, we do in-home lead inspections. and we can put you in touch with them. They can do dust wipe samples inside of the home. It would specifically measure for lead content in that dust. I'm not sure if that answers that question. I know my email address was up earlier. I could maybe put it in the chat, and that respondent can reach out to me and I can connect them.
Thanks, Jenny. Representative Gomez, would you like to provide your question or comment?
Yeah, thank you for the chance. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for being here. So I just wanted to ask the question that I put in the chat. It's been 10 days since there was an article published by the Star Tribune in which the PCA challenges the science, says in contrast to what we read in the notice of violation, that they believed that there was not an exceedance of PM 2.5 as allowed under the permit. Also in that article, they said that they thought the EPA had gotten their figures mixed up, gotten their numbers mixed up. Obviously, we've talked about the health impacts of PM 2.5. It's, a criteria pollutant. I'm really concerned about this discrepancy. I'm wondering in the 10 days since that article came out, well, first of all, I'm wondering if the commissioner and the assistant commissioner can answer the question as to whether they still believe that the EPA got their numbers wrong. And if the EPA can say if they still believe that they got their numbers right and stand behind the work of their scientists. And I'm wondering if we can get an update about how this is being settled or has been settled. And if it has not been settled, what the timeline is for telling the community whether there's like twice as much PM 2.5 or has been as was allowed under the permit, and how that's going to be communicated out now that we've basically had this really, I just want to stress, a very unusual situation of having a federal and a state regulatory agency disagree about the most basic findings that impact human health. And yeah, so I'm just hoping for an update and for some clarification of that. Thank you.
Yeah, Kevin, I'll take that question, and I want to make one emphasis before I start, and whether or not the quote was correct or not. I do not recall saying that EPA was wrong. What we have been working with EPA since the notice of violation has been out and publicized has been that we were not able to replicate the calculation. We've been spending the time working with EPA, and I think we are getting closer and closer to understanding how we each approach the interpretation and the calculation. We're going to continue to working with EPA on that, on those discussions. We're also going to be working with EPA, and I know EPA has the process included about receiving then the information from the company as response to their request for information and how that applies into how the calculation is done. One of the additional items that I want to emphasize that Carrie talked about in our presentation was that that we have not measured a violation of air quality standard for fine particles or PM 2.5 or elevated levels of fine particles or PM 2.5. We're going to continue that monitoring. We're going to add the additional monitors, particularly those regulatory monitors, so that we can continue to provide that assurance and verification moving forward. And we can provide as much information as we can as we go forward with the continuing discussions with EPA, noting that as EPA has said there are parts of this process that are considered not public under EPA's processes for an ongoing investigation and enforcement action. So we'll have to also negotiate around those requirements about what we can share at what time moving forward, but we do continue the conversations with EPA on a very regular basis around this facilities and all of the shared enforcement activities that EPA and the MPCA have in Minnesota.
Brian, did you have anything to add to that or no? Just want to offer the opportunity.
No, I don't have anything to add. Our conversations are ongoing.
Thank you, Brian.
I think we have time for about one more question. Evan Mulholland, please feel free to provide your question or comment.
Sure. Hey, this is Evan Mulholland. I hope Leslie is on the call. I'm just hoping you can just provide a direct answer to that question. Are you going to test the furnace stack or just the baghouse exhausts? Because we all read, number one, the inspection report says the furnace is uncontrolled. Number two, the 114 letter from EPA says you're going to test the baghouses. So are you going to test the furnace or not test the furnace?
I'm curious if anyone from the EPA can provide any additional clarity on that at the moment.
I can't provide any additional clarity on that. The information requests asked to stack test the baghouses. That's correct.
Thank you, Brian. I think we are going to turn it over to Commissioner Kessler to close things out at the moment. Thank you to everyone for joining us today and providing your questions. We will have this recording available on the MPCA's Smith Foundry webpage. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, we are working on the capability and functionality on that website to take questions that should also be live early next week. So you can provide questions directly to an inbox that will be located on the webpage. We will provide these updates to our email list that is available on the MPCA website for sign up as well. There should be an option on this website to sign up for updates on South Minneapolis air monitoring, and we will provide a note once those components are live on our website as well too. So with that, I think I will turn things over to Commissioner Kessler to close the meeting out today.
Yeah, Kevin, I recognize it's 1 o'clock and just want to say thank you to everyone again for your time today. For those that you have joined us twice this week, we really appreciate your interest and your ongoing commitment. Please know that we are also committed. I appreciate CJ pointing out opportunities in January. We will be in touch between now and then. We're going to make the recording and questions available on the website next week. We will be making the stack test data available as soon as it's available, and we continue to work on continuous emissions monitoring. So more to come very soon. Thanks again, and everyone, please have a good rest of your day.